Hi, everyone. This is Gary Berman, host of the Cyber Hero Adventure Show, coming to you with an extremely important breaking story in that CrowdStrike and Microsoft are having a significant global issue pertaining to some security-related issues, but not cybersecurity. These were updates in the CrowdStrike system that we're going to listen and learn from some of the world's leading experts on this. And so let me begin by welcoming the co-host of our show, Bob Turner. Hey, Bob.
Good morning, Gary.
Morning. And we also have Mike Davis with us, who has an amazing background in a wide range of cybersecurity. Hey, Mike. And last but not least, we have Ernie Edmonds, who, at least from my perspective, is, if not the leading authority, one of the leading authorities on Windows and Microsoft and these types of issues. And Ernie, so glad you could join us, all of you, on such short notice.
Thanks, Gary.
Indeed. So Ernie, I know you have a hard stop at 10:25 Pacific. So let's start with you. What's happening here as we understand it so far?
What we know right now is that there was a push that was pushed out from CrowdStrike, specifically dealing with Windows operating system. The file in question has been traced down to a .sys file, which is a low-level kernel mode file within Windows. So .sys files, they're used by the operating system, not by the end user. So this particular file did have at least one line of code that rendered Windows unstable. And of course, that's what we're dealing with now. A fix is out. The problem with that is once these machines are down, they can't just be updated over a patch, like the first one was. There's different ways to fix this, but they all require manual intervention. So it's going to be a while before all systems are restored just because of the manual nature of things.
And so our audience, I'm sure, understands the difference between manual and automated updates. But what are the steps that someone would need to do to get their system up and running again?
The first thing is be kind to your IT guy, because he's been dealt a really serious blow today on a Friday. So if it's a localized workstation, like, on-prem, not cloud-based, then the steps are to boot into safe mode if you can. And then once you're in safe mode, you can also do safe mode with networking, and it may speed things along a little bit. But boot into safe mode, find the file that is necessary or that is causing the problems. It's going to be, again, the .sys file. It ends in 291.sys. The timestamp will be 0409 UTC, so Greenwich time, Universal Time, 0409. If you have that file, then delete it. And what should happen is when you reboot, it will restore the old file or get the new file, depending on how it's configured and what your operating system is. And it should come back up and be okay. The problem is, if you've got 10,000 computers, that's 10,000 times that the IT guy has to do this. So it's pretty straightforward. And if you're using cloud-based, then it's a little bit different. But I think most of the small to medium enterprises don't use cloud-based workstations. I should also say that if you have Windows 7 or Legacy or 2008 R2 on the server side or Legacy, they are not impacted by this. So it's very much a new Windows thing. So yeah, that's how you fix it from a localized perspective.
Well, I mean, this would be one of the first times I've heard it's good to have an older version of Windows.
Well, it's not. So no, that's not good. The reason it's not impacted is because you're no longer getting security updates for that. So imagine all of the vulnerabilities you're exposed to. So that the saving grace is not necessarily a good thing in this case.
And so the last sort of deep technical question is, it's been widely reported that you get the blue screen of death For our audience that may not be familiar with that term, can you help us understand what it means?
Yeah, it's technically called a stop screen, and it's when the operating system can no longer perform its activity. They are nearly always triggered by a kernel mode driver or a kernel mode something. And the way Windows operates is you've got kernel mode, which deals with the hardware and the device drivers and the CPU itself and the operating system, the actual kernel itself. So these are all kernel mode processes, and this is most likely where you'll see what we would call a BSOD, blue screen of death. Um, that's where most of these things will occur. However, there are times when a user mode will make a call, an illegal call to a kernel mode something, and also trigger a BSOD. So it's not exclusive to that because, well, it is exclusive to it because the kernel mode something will always cause the BSOD. However, the user mode, like an application that is up in the user space, can make that call and trigger it.
Indeed. And so, Bob, we'll turn to you next. You and I spoke earlier this morning about the need to discuss this, in a larger format. What's your take so far?
Well, I think the good news is that if you are your CrowdStrike Falcon is protecting Unix or Linux systems, then they have not been affected. This is simply just a Microsoft thing. And then as Ernie mentioned, if you're operating on out of date software, I guess this is the one instance where that's okay. But then again, we just described why it's a partially okay answer. I'm thinking of the news reports out there saying that 9/11 systems are down, 911 systems are down, airport and airline scheduling systems are down. And so I know that at an enterprise level and at a tactical operational level for a lot of organizations, this is a big deal. And especially if you're the one who is trying to get a hold of 911, or if you're also trying to get home from somewhere. Hey, it's Friday. It's a lot of travel going on. I imagine Milwaukee Airport is kind of busy right now.
Yeah, for sure. And Mike, you have a lot of experience in these kinds of matters. What's your take so far? You're on mute, I think.
I got that T-shirt. I just saw it pop. At least my computer reminded me, right? Yeah, so I'm really more of a strategic risk management kind of guy, and I look at the bigger picture and the things that keep going on. Like we all know, cyber hygiene sucks, and there's a whole bunch of foundational issues why we're not really meeting the need of secure systems overall. So in this particular case, I'd mentioned to you earlier, I got 4 things that pop right up. More strategic, but still applies to just about everybody out there, SMBs and on up, and that's the dependence on third-party software, the services, your SaaS. There are a lot out there, and you're just assuming to a large degree that they're in business to do that, so they'll keep it protected. Well, generally, yes, but that's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of even small businesses, third-party risk management. Taking a look at who you got, who's critical that you can't do without, and is there a opportunity to slide somebody else in there, another service, if it was a long term, and then also what their general state of security is. Now we all trust Microsoft, so pretty hard to go kind of run down their alley and question them because they've got a pretty good one. In this particular case, unfortunately, their third party security aspect on CrowdStrike got them. That's number one. Number 2 is the importance of communications. I think you brought that up right away, Gary or Bob. It was like they got the word out right away and let everybody know it wasn't a cyber incident, et cetera, et cetera. But it just goes to show you that those communications, whether it's a operational issue outage or cyber, it doesn't really matter. Those things really, that effectiveness in communications really matters a lot. And third, Bob, I think you said that too, the integration challenges, not just the products we have and the vendors we have, but in some folks, open system security, a lot of those other things that just got a whole litany of things in there. You've heard of the SBOM or the security bill of materials where they're trying to at least list the stuff, the parts that go into a product, so you can have a chance at maybe figuring out the risks there. And then finally, a backup and redundancy. Clearly, they had a back out plan when they put that in. They did, CrowdStrike, but as Ernie mentioned, now the end users, they get to go in and then manually delete it, like he said, or back that out and force the upgraded sys file to be entered. So in general, I would take this as a wake-up call for most folks to pay a little bit more attention to the third-party vendors and services that they got, that they're completely reliant on.
Yeah, I
Indeed.
totally agree with Mike. And Gary, here's my other concern that kind of goes along with that. Those are all great, but the third party issue that I'm more worried about is, where are you getting your advice from now? Let's face it, X/Twitter and other social media channels, they're helpful, but where you need to be is, you need to be talking to if you're a CrowdStrike customer, you need to be talking to that CrowdStrike person and making sure that that's not the only issue that you have. So
Yeah.
I look at the operational aspect of it as, hopefully somebody in your organization at the enterprise level has already made that call. But if you're the small to mid-market business, which is sort of our sweet spot, you really need to know who to call and where to get your best advice from.
Yeah, indeed. And Ernie, turning back to the comment you made earlier about the cloud, there was some mention. George Kurtz spoke, I think, first to CNBC this morning, which is where I learned about it, that Azure was not, or probably not, affected. Do you have any insight about that?
What we know right now, and again, everything is kind of up in the air. There was an Azure outage just prior to this. We don't know if they are linked at all. Azure occasionally does go down. There's been some Azure MFA outages over the past year or so that have caused some problems for some people. But we don't know that this is linked to the CrowdStrike issue at all. But there was an outage, at least somewhat of an outage just prior to this happening.
And Emily, thanks so much for joining us. It's actually perfect timing because I was just mentioning that the CEO of CrowdStrike, George Kurtz, appeared on CNBC, and I'm sure he's leaning in from a communication standpoint, which is definitely the right thing to do. Based on what you understand so far, what are the communications challenges associated, with managing this? Disaster plan, that kind of thing?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they're just sort of deep into crisis communication right now. I mean, that's why he's probably trying to be transparent and be present in and then behind the scenes, they're probably trying desperately to fix what's going on. But I mean, if that's what you're asking me, yeah, this is a typical crisis communication situation.
What would that look like? What would you, if you were George Kurtz, counsel about communicating this? What would your advice be?
Well, I mean, you would talk to your employees, you would do customer outreach, you would do press release, you would monitor social media and do proactive messaging there. You would do an immediate website update. I haven't looked and seen, but I assume a company with this stature that's this well regarded has done all of what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. They'd be briefing the employees and providing guidance on how to respond to inquiries. They would obviously be consulting their legal experts to understand any potential legal ramifications. They'd have designated, and clearly he's the spokesperson to address the media and stakeholders, and the key messages, I assume, would be commitment to excellence, transparency, and responsibility for this, to tell their story, to work with their partners. I guess Microsoft is the biggest one that we're hearing about. And then, talk about the steps that they've taken to prevent the recurrence of the incident and how they can use it to train other businesses how to prevent such end user failure, right?
Mhm.
Wow, that's very well said. And to unpack that a little bit, let's just talk about the legal or financial, potential liabilities. Ernie, you and I were communicating a little bit earlier, about that. What is your, very, very early knee-jerk sort of impression about liabilities? What I can share from the CNBC report is that their stock was down 12%. Which is, very significant. I'm not sure what it is now, but a couple hours ago. What's your assessment about legal liabilities, and what is CrowdStrike looking at here if you had to assess it?
Well,
Not me. I'm not qualified to talk about that.
No, Ernie. I was asking Ernie about that.
yeah, I
Sorry.
was going to say I'm an engineer qualified to talk about that either, but CrowdStrike has a really good reputation. In the industry, they are top shelf and they're very well respected, and they have earned that reputation through time. Be that as it is, this is a big hit. There is, seemingly billions in lost revenue from these companies. So that's going to be directly traced back to this. Yeah, I'm not a financial person, so I really have no idea. I'm an engineer, but I would imagine that there will be some discussion, possibly litigation, but that's just speculation. That's really all I can say.
From an engineering perspective, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bob.
I guess I'm going back to my operational mode here. It's with some of the impact to 911 centers and such. I mean, there's probably going to be a need for them to maybe examine just about some of the smaller details so they know why their systems went down. And maybe there's going to be a dependency thing. Maybe they need to have secondary and tertiary systems that are running on different OSs that they can immediately just place into operation. And they probably haven't had that situation yet, so they didn't think about it. And maybe this will cause a little bit more thinking. And when Mike and I talk about third-party risk management, I mean, that really becomes one of those things. How can a CrowdStrike vulnerability take out Microsoft products? Well, we'll find that out eventually, but what do you do in case it does happen and you notice it's your Microsoft products? Do you have other products, other operating systems available that you can back up, especially if you're those key resource critical infrastructure type services like 911 operations?
Yeah, so Gary, back on the financial thing, I'm not an expert either, but we all saw Target a long time ago. They dipped and they came back right up, and everything I read, because I was interested in that as well, shows that in general, big corporations, they dip and they come right back up. And so there's a feeling that it doesn't really matter per se. Now this is the chain of events here is pretty significant. So I think you might see a little bit of a dip there, but in general, my sense is it'll dip and it'll be up about where it was in a day or two.
I mean, reputational risk is another large issue that they're probably juggling right now. And back to some conversations. I joined late, so forgive me, but Gary, I know you and Bob have had many conversations about the national security implications of a fragile infrastructure. This kind of shows how tightly wound the U.S. cyber infrastructure is, and how it's, while this is at the moment a largely business impact, it raises serious questions for, I'm sure, the experts in DC looking at national security.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because Ernie and I had a conversation earlier about the AT&T breach. Maybe 100 million or so people, including the Department of Defense, right, Ernie?
Yeah, anytime you have one of these larger companies, they're going to have a lot of exposure when something happens. The difference here is AT&T got hacked. This is not a hack, as you said in the beginning. This is an accident. And when we go into the postmortem, we'll be able to analyze, was it properly tested, and why did this happen, and how can we make sure that it never happens again? And to Bob's point, going forward, I would imagine that CrowdStrike will never have something like this happen again, because when things happen, that's part of the postmortem is how do we make sure that this never ever can happen again? And while absolutes are not really possible, we can predict that testing will certainly increase, that they will do everything possible. And I think that they were probably doing due care anyway, just knowing the reputation of CrowdStrike. But going forward, they will almost certainly double down, triple down on this testing to make sure that this just simply can't happen again.
You know, just to build on that point, and I'll, to any of you for the moment, you know, one of the things that we were doing at the Cyber Hero vCISO network is to kind of optimize the talent of actual, you know, high-level people who can navigate these and other kinds of issues. You know, I wonder, you know, as a network, anyone can just chime in. Is there something we can and should be doing to help besides shining the light?
So one thing that is evident right now is, as Emily said earlier, the diversification of the environment. A homogeneous environment is susceptible to a single thing, in this case, the single .sys file, and it took down all modern Windows that had that file, that were utilizing that file. So to diversify the environment using Linux, whatever, that's an option. It's going to increase cost, and the data architecture is probably going to need to be modified to where those systems can access the same data that the Windows infrastructure was able to access beforehand, not something that's stale, you know. Depending on what it is, if it's like air traffic or something, you just can't use stale records. You've got to have near real time or real time records in order to operate effectively. So there will be costs, there will be complexity, and it just may not make sense to do that. But maybe it does when we start talking about national security. You know, national security systems, yes, they do use Windows in certain instances, but they don't exclusively use Windows, and they don't use Windows where it matters in terms of like defense. You know, the are often not even open channel systems. They're dedicated systems that have been baked from the ground up internally to the DoD or to, you know, whatever agency is using it. So the likelihood of somebody being able to introduce something like this is very low.
Well, I guess when I was talking about national security, I was talking about the tightly intertwined market. You know, we have one provider serving so many huge, you know, web of companies and businesses through its partner with Microsoft, that I think, you know, the decoupling, or I think, Gary, you and Bob have discussed this before, rather than having one central web, right, you want to have multiple points to protect this kind of event. User error, you know, is what brings whole companies down quite often, right? I mean, somebody who clicks on a phishing email can release, you know, attack to the entire corporation. So not that I'm equating these, I'm just saying that a small user error can have large implications, as this shows, but this also shows the important, and I would defer to the cybersecurity experts here, of,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
disassembling.
so national security to me is quite broader than just the federal, the DoD. I mean, they all rely on critical infrastructure, which, as we all know, is 85–90% controlled by commercial industry. So which are what we're talking about. So to me, it does have a pretty significant global scale. I'd be interested in seeing postmortem, like Ernie said, what types of impact we did have to our, especially our industrial base.
Yeah,
I'll,
and
I'll,
so
I'll give you my perfect example. Just this morning, I was at a commercial facility getting my oil changed, and they had to have manual operations in place because their computers were down too, because of the way their enterprise is controlled. You know, we probably don't know the total extent of everybody impacted by this, but you know, let's take the ones that have already been hitting the news. You know, again, airlines, 911, and those larger operations, which really depend upon Windows products for their operating centers, their command centers, and so that's why this one becomes such a challenge. But how many of our small business organizations that's the only terminal they have? You know, they have to, like this particular enterprise level shop, it was one of their outlets. What if it was just your business and you had a lot of critical stuff going on right now? You would be out of work until you get one of the other fix, either figure out what the Microsoft problem was or figure out what the checkpoint problem was.
yeah, and so Ernie, I know you have to
Or, I'm sorry,
run.
CrowdStrike. I said checkpoint. CrowdStrike.
Yeah, for sure. Ernie, I know you have to run. Thanks for adjusting your schedule on such short notice. Any final thoughts for you?
Be kind to your IT guy.
Yes,
They're-
I totally agree.
They
Applause.
are they're doing their best. I've spoken to some of my network who are in that role, and you know, they're struggling. It's a resource constraint. We will get through this. It'll take a little bit of time, maybe a lot of time, depending on how many workstations and servers that are impacted by it. But you know, just watch, and like we've talked about a couple times, this post-mortem, they're probably not gonna come out with everything just all out on the table, because that in and of itself is a security risk when you do something like that. But listen closely to what it is, dig to see what it is. These .sys files, you can open them up and look at them a lot of times, and you know, you can see what this code looks like. The actual coders out there, I'm not a coder, I'm an engineer, network and systems by trade, but the coders can analyze and see what this was, possibly look at other aspects that are close, not an exact match, but a close match that could also cause issues. And we'll learn more about it, and we'll be better because of it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I
Wise
appreciate
words,
that.
Ernie. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I
Well,
appreciate that optimistic thing, you know, point of view for sure. Ernie, thanks a lot. I'll do a little wrap up with everyone else. So Emily, you know, the whole communications aspect of this, I think you laid out very well. What final thoughts would you have for, let's say, this small company that is having to deal with oil changes and being on paper, I guess?
I guess I would continue to monitor the updates, and I would continue to, sorry about my dog, that you might want to go to somebody else because I don't want to take over with a dog barking, but my thoughts about communication would be that they are constantly proactively messaging their customers and saying that this is what we know, this is what we don't know. You know, be prepared for immediate requests. Again, sticking to key messages. Key messages for a small business owner is this was out of our hands, but we're going to do absolutely what we can to correct this as soon as possible. We'll make sure that we take care of our customers, that the small business monitors media coverage and social media sentiment about this, track, you know, customer feedback and shareholder feedback, assess the impact this might have on its reputation. I think by and large, so many people were affected by this situation that the general public will be more understanding.
Well,
for a small business facing this, because they probably had some kind of impact as well. You know, as we were talking about the larger question of risk, and I know you guys work on this a lot, the idea, I'm wondering if state government offices aren't affected by this, because a lot of state governments use Windows products and Microsoft.
I would imagine they are, and you know, this being a Friday in a week, there's probably a lot of them that are trying to, you know, get that week's business done, and they're going to be, you know, offline or impaired at least. I also like, you know, the thought that you were expressing about making sure that you're really clear in what you know and what you don't know. And I think that's important. And it's okay in this instance, because we have information on the street that kind of lays out what's going on, to say, yeah, we know what's going on, but we're not sure about our recovery strategy because, and then, you know, if they're Windows dependent, they're Windows dependent. That's a choice that was made that is not necessarily a exploitable issue unless something like this happens.
Right. I mean, if an entire airport and flight system can go down because of their connection with this, then I think I would be more understanding of my local, you know, oil change company to having to deal with this.
Yeah, so
that's-
my key takeaway, especially for small businesses, is where you can, you got to have content. You got to think out the box a little bit and have a fancy term business continuity plan, but you got to have contingencies. What if your cloud goes down? You got a backup cloud provider, because you're completely at the mercy of them staying up.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, if you're a Microsoft shop, and
Mike,
your individual piece keys get hosed. I don't know what kind of but anyway, the contingency planning, and then you got to make sure my internet's getting unstable again. So anyway, contingency planning and manual processes where you can.
well, to you, Bob Turner and Mike Davis and Emily Brown, on behalf of a grateful and somewhat shocked digital universe, thanks for who you are and for what you do and why you do it. And to our audience, we're going to convene some of the leaders of the Cyber Hero vCISO network and see what is an appropriate and helpful next step that we can do as a network to do our part to get through this crisis. For more information, you can visit our website, chnvciso.com. And have a good day.
Thanks all.
Well.